Hello everybody, welcome to this panel session, session 6 of the African Mining Summit, which is concentrating on energy, battery minerals and the role Africa has to play. We've got a great panel today consisting of Tony Harwood from Montero Mining, Lance Hooper from Cobalt Blockchain and Naphtally from African Resource Development. So first of all, I'll introduce myself. I'm Bill Witham. I'm the CEO of the Australia Africa Minerals and Energy Group. We're based out of Perth in Western Australia. Our membership consists of all the companies in Australia that are operating in Africa in the resources and sector, mainly in the mining, but also mining services as well. It's been a busy year for us, as you can imagine, and our members continue to operate well in Africa. So I've known some of these people from around the traps, and I'd like to introduce the panel now. So first of all, on my left on my screen is Tony Harwood. Tony, could you just give a brief 2 or 3 minute introduction of yourself and your company?
Yeah, well, I've operated in Africa most of my career. I'm based out of Johannesburg. I'm a president and CEO of a company called Montero Mining and Exploration. We're listed on the Toronto Stock Exchange, the Venture Exchange. In terms of the company, we've been involved in rare earths and more recently in the battery metals. And we've been exploring for battery metals in Namibia and also in Chile and South America. Operationally based in Johannesburg, but office in Vancouver.
All right, excellent. Thanks, Tony. Next we have Naphtally Mafa. Naphtally is the founder and managing director of African Resources Development.
Hello, everyone. My name is Naphtally. As Bill had indicated, I am the founder and managing director of ARD, African Resource Development. It's a level 1 BE mining and services company out of Limpopo, where I was born. On the mining side, we have got a property, a manganese property, I should say, in Tamazimbi. That's the one that we are working on, and we hold that 100%. And we do services on the other end, which is basically the most active part of our business. We partner with the mostly international mining companies or services company. We have been doing underground hard rock mining services. Our last job before COVID, I think it was in Palabura Copper, and that is the underground mining services. We also partner with our energy, energy business, partner with an energy group out of Canada. It's Hybrid Power Solutions. We have been converting a telehandler. That's our project that we're working on, a telehandler from a diesel-powered engine into electric, and that's nearing completion. And on the rail business, so we partner with UWC, a Russian-based manufacturer of wagons. And in a nutshell, that's what we do, and that's who we are.
That's quite a varied range, very interesting, thanks. And also on our panel, we have Lance Hooper. Lance is the president of Cobalt Blockchain, Inc. Lance, please, introduce yourself to the audience.
Thanks, Bill. So Lance Hooper, I'm president, COO, Cobalt Blockchain. We're listed on the Toronto Stock Exchange Venture under COBC. We're active in the Democratic Republic of Congo, focused on cobalt. We work directly with a segment of the market that produces 20% of global cobalt supply, which is the artisanal small scale sector. We're also partnered with a group called Traxys on a cobalt hydroxide plant, which we're looking to commission in the next few months, which is a precursor element for batteries. One of our core differentiators is the idea of tracking the provenance of the cobalt that we're sourcing. So working with the mining cooperatives. So there's a tag and bag traceability system built on a blockchain platform that ultimately will give the downstream consumers of our cobalt hydroxide comfort that there's no child labor, there are no armed groups benefiting, and there's some acceptable environmental and workplace health and safety practices. I'm originally born in Rustenburg, South Africa, have deep ties to the African continent, and have been working on and off in the DRC for the last 15 years.
Yeah, all right. Great, Lance. Well, thanks. That's also very interesting. We'll hear a bit more through the hour on your company. Okay, we'll get into a couple of specific questions now. Maybe we'll go back to you, Dr. Tony Harwood. Can you just give us a quick rundown now? What are the battery metals and where they actually are mined at the moment? I guess, you know, especially in respect to Africa.
Yeah, well, sorry, I failed to mention that I'm a geologist, so you have to just take that as it is. I guess battery metals are those metals that are mined that are put into batteries, and I think probably at the forefront at the moment. And the forefront at the moment, there's probably lithium, there's cobalt, there's nickel. And then groups have been looking at interesting things such as vanadium and also manganese and aluminium has been part of this battery series as well as graphite. So really any metal that goes into batteries. But I just want to deal with largely because of the panel, it's lithium, which we've been exploring for, and cobalt. Now, just to hit the cobalt first, pretty much Africa probably leads the world in terms of access to mineable high-grade cobalt, found in the DRC, and I'm sure Lance is going to tell us about what he's doing there. But some of the major producers of cobalt are in the DRC. It's just the nature of the geology of the copper belt in the DRC. It's enriched in cobalt, so it's a major component there. What I've been really mainly focusing in on is lithium, and lithium occurs in largely two types of form. There's a form you find it in brines, and these brines located in Chile, Argentina, and in Bolivia in South America. And it's a very sort of strange and interesting type of deposit. These are saltwater type brines above a bunch of sediments they find in the Andes of South America. So there's that type of deposit, and that type of deposit probably makes up, in terms of lithium production, probably about 50%, or it goes up and down depending on production levels and appetite. And then the other type of lithium deposit is a hard rock lithium deposit, where miners mine lithium as a mineral, and largely Australia is a major producer, and so is China. But Africa has got a number of lithium type hard rock deposits. The largest one, and one of the largest in the world, is actually in the DRC up in the north. But there are others that are producing lithium in Zimbabwe, and then also in Namibia to a certain extent. So these types of deposits occur in pegmatitic environments, and so in Africa, there are some lithium deposits in West Africa, in Mali, but largely the deposits, again, DRC, Zimbabwe, and Namibia, with a few showings in perhaps South Africa. The issue, so we less focused on Africa. The lithium is mined as a lithium mineral, and occurs in these pegmatitic rocks. These are very coarse-grained, magmatic type rocks, and occurs crystals of lithium minerals. And there are a variety of lithium minerals, and they're largely lithium aluminium silicates, or maybe lithium phosphate silicates. And because lithium is quite a light element, even if you've got, say, 100% lithium mineral crystal, you could probably at maximum only get between 6 and say 9% lithium in a concentrate, in 100% concentrate. So that means effectively that you could be the best miner in the world, but your concentrate only contains about between 6 and 9% if it's 100% concentrate of your target elements. And therefore, that means if you transport it as a mineral concentrate, you're going to be transporting plus 90% of waste rock. And this is expensive, and this causes considerable issues in terms of transportation, in terms of movement, because that can largely take up a large part of the cost. So infrastructure plays a huge part in lithium hard rock mining, and that's what we have in Africa. And certainly the different projects around Africa are challenged to a certain extent by the transportation costs. And then also the refineries which take these lithium minerals are often very specific about the type of lithium mineral that they can process. And the most popular or the most commonly used mineral is spodumene. Petalite is another mineral, and these are lithium, aluminium, silicates. But then we've also got other minerals such as lepidolite. Now, this brings the question: how do we reduce the cost of transport? Well, you know, it's largely up to governments or private enterprise to make transportation routes a lot cheaper and simpler. But then there's a possibility of beneficiation. The issue with beneficiation then is one of cost of chemicals and skills bases. So that presents another challenge. So that's lithium and a bit of cobalt. I think I could stop there.
Yeah, no, that's interesting, Tony, and yeah, good summary. And yeah, obviously Western Australia has some of those as well, but as you mentioned, Mali and DRC with those large pegmatites. I might go on to you now, Lance, and just talk about, you know, as Tony was saying, there is obviously the geology in Africa lends itself, and there are a lot of the minerals, and we haven't mentioned some of the others like nickel and graphite, etc. But what is your company, what's the role playing, and how do you see fitting into the supply chain there of the supply of these strategic battery metals and the responsible supply of those as well in the African context?
Yeah, it's a great question, Bill. I think we're seeing over the last 2-3 years in particular, a growing pressure on mining companies and producers of battery metals to have demonstrate better visibility into the supply chain. It's already happening in the DRC with tin, tantalum, tungsten, largely driven through the US Dodd-Frank, but also more recently some EU legislation that's kind of forcing bigger companies to be have that visibility into the supply chain and do the requisite due diligence to make sure they're ethically sourcing their commodities. So that's definitely one pressure you're seeing. With cobalt, 70% of it comes from the DRC, 50% from big mines, 20%, as I mentioned, from the artisanal and small scale sector. So it's a very supply constrained mineral. As a result, you're seeing movement, you know, fairly recently amongst groups. They're creating almost closed loop supply chains. So you'll have a car maker partnering with a battery maker, partnering with a chemical company, looking to lock up several years of feed from the DRC. So there's definitely some interesting dynamics going on with supply chains. But I think fundamentally you have between legislation, regulations, you have groups like Amnesty International that have been highly critical of tech companies and EV companies for not having that visibility into where they're sourcing cobalt from, and potentially supporting child labor and other practices that they don't want to be associated with. So I think there's definitely a growing movement, not just in the DRC, but we're seeing it internationally as well. There's not just battery metals, other metals, the idea of tracking the provenance and all of the steps along the supply chain as it's produced into a finished good.
Yeah, no, that's certainly been driven a lot around the Western world and going back into Africa. We might come back to that a little bit later, that issue, but we haven't heard from Naphtally as yet. Naphtally, yeah, your interest is very interesting what you're saying, focusing a bit more on Southern Africa, South Africa. What's your feeling about not just the mining of these metals and minerals, but what about the transition of the traditional coal-powered generating plants to some sort of new clean energy generating plants and the bringing in of carbon emissions controls and et cetera and regulation? Do you think that's bringing opportunities, or do you reckon it's just a burden to the African economy, especially the African economies, especially in this current status?
Yeah, Bill, thanks for the questions. It's gonna, I always say, it's gonna depend on which side it's coming from. But in terms of, I feel anyway, in terms of from the South African and African perspective or point of view, there has been a lot of resentment in terms of carbon emissions and all the regulations that are being brought in to control the emissions and trying to move basically from traditionally coal-powered power stations into more renewable energy. And there has been, it is a shift, and we have to understand the shift. It's most of the time not comfortable. So that it is a burden because there is a large amount of capital that needs to be invested in those projects, and there's also an existing project that are running, have been running for quite a number of years, basically in South Africa. So if you look at an African point of view, the Africans are moving, they are progressing, and I always like to measure the progress based on the basic number line, where you move from the negative numbers to zero and then from zero to the positive. So historically, there has been a lot of, I would say, bad energy towards that migration. And there has been a victim mentality kind of an opinion from that African point of view, saying that, well, the Europeans built their infrastructure, the Americans did everything, they had the leisure to explore their minerals, they had no rules, they had no regulations, we did not have any issues with carbon emissions, and now Africa is trying to have a go. Bang, here we go, we have got regulations and we can't do this, we are emitting too much of this, we need to watch the ozone layer and all sorts of things. So but if you're going to balance it looking at both ways, it is an opportunity for young Africans like myself. You wouldn't find any of those Africans like me in the industry. There were no opportunities. So as much as it is a hard and a challenging migration, and also capital intense projects, there are opportunities there that we never had. And in the middle of all that, I believe that there has been a lot of resistance in the governments as well to accepting that the coal-powered stations were actually an issue. So I believe that we have grown, we have progressed, we are moving towards the direction of renewable energy. In specifically when you talk about South Africa, not long ago there wasn't any admission of coal being a hazard or being a polluter. So we have moved from there to accepting that now we have got a problem here. Coal cannot be sustained. Coal poses a lot of hazard environmentally, and we have accepted that. And I believe that is in the right direction. Burden, yes, but viable, reliable projects are always attracting investors. And I believe that growth and that acceptance of the issues around the coal is a very big move for the Africans. And it is a lot of opportunities. And I believe that it can only be getting better and moving a lot more greener than we were. And all the psychological and victim thinking or perceptions, I believe we are slowly growing out of that and accepting that it is not a target as Africans, or Africa was not a target, or it's not supposed to be targeted as Africa to slow down its growth, but it's it's a necessity or necessary evil, if I should say. And but we have to take that both and both from both sides, and understand that at the time when we did not have any knowledge of the damage that the coal was causing, we did not have measures. But now that we do have measures, we have got resources, we get resources, and we just need to move on. And I think we are doing that. And there's a lot of good signs and projects that are coming, that some have been implemented in some of the operations in Africa and South Africa. That shows a lot of positive and movements towards the green energy generation.
Yeah, right. Well, that's an interesting perspective. Yeah, I mean, we can see that Africa has, you know, those minerals that are essential for helping in storing renewable energy. And we know that Africa has had energy shortages, especially recently in South Africa, where you've got the rolling load shedding, and you know, some of the hydro projects are quite low on water. But yeah, obviously, we'll go back to you, Tony, and ask, you know, we talked about the deposits. What do you see the barriers to entry are just for the value adding? I think at this stage, just looking at, are there some value adding opportunities there in Africa, especially around lithium? And can you see investors building some of these big chemistry sets in Africa?
Yeah, I think the issue is always about money, and you know, whether that money comes from government in terms of incentives or it comes from the private sector. Certainly, it does make a lot of sense to have beneficiation, you know, a process plant value add next to the mine that's producing, you know, the raw material, you know, rather than shipping, you know, millions of tons of raw material to more developed countries, you know, like China or Europe or the Americas, Australia. You know, why? You know, the question is, why can't we beneficiate here? Well, you know, it's about incentive and it's about skill, and you know, these more developed countries have got large supplies of skill and large supplies of incentives, and they've already built numerous chemistry sets. You know, that's not to say that, you know, process beneficiation plant, you know, producing add-on value to lithium or cobalt, you know, cannot happen, you know, in Africa. Of course it can, but you know, one must realize that also that there's a supply chain, you know. So it's not, you know, it's like, okay, well, you know, we've got a lithium deposit, we've got a cobalt deposit. Let's build a lithium cobalt battery. Let's do that. Now that's, you know, if you were to look at the supply chain, you know, there's quite a number of steps going from a mine through to the chemical compounds, then through to the manufacture and further processing through to the detailed work that needs to be done to produce a battery. So, you know, and not just one company does that. You know, there are a number of companies that are involved and skilled in each part of that part of the value chain, you know, from the mining through to chemical processing, through to, you know, manufacture of components, through to the battery. So, you know, one in Africa, there has to be an ability to attract that value chain. And you know, and then, well, what is there in Africa? Well, we've certainly got the deposits. I'd suggest that we have the skills. I suggest that Africa has the wherewithal to be able to do that. But you know, you've got to compete with global players. So, you know, how do you compete on cost? Well, governments have got to supply incentives. There've got to be reasons why, you know, why you would build a battery factory or why a company would build a battery factory in Africa. And you know, we've seen this in South Africa and other parts of Africa with the car industry and with also the catalysts, you know, so there's been incentives to do that. So, but you know, it's quite a complex value chain, and really it's okay saying we've got the commodity, but then what's going to incentivize, and really we could be a global player. I think we've got the skills, deposits. I think industry just needs to be given those incentives and stability as well for long-term investment here.
Tony, if I can just add on to what you said, and also Naphtally, I think just from my perspective in the DRC, power is certainly an issue, but we have the Inga Dam project, which it looks like just with the pure megawatts has enough power for half of Africa, significant power. So that's definitely something I see improving over the next number of years. It's a requirement to do in-country beneficiation. You're also seeing throughout Africa just changes to encourage more processing in country is the legislation and regulations around, in DRC, you're no longer able to export a low grade copper cobalt concentrate. They want you to do the upgrading in country. There are taxes and penalties that incentivize players to process in country. And I think in terms of talent, we've certainly on our team and have seen throughout, whether it's DRC or some hubs in Rwanda, the young talent that's happening in Africa is amazing. And I think it's incumbent on all of us to seek out and develop talent locally rather than traditional models where it's bringing in all expats. So I think there's some interesting dynamics and changes happening in front of us right now.
Yeah, that's a good point, Lance. I mean, there's no doubt that under this COVID-19 situation, we have seen a lot of all the mines in our members operating well, and people are stepping up and solving the problems. So that's good to hear. Yeah, looking forward to these hydro projects getting up and going. Just Lance, just a bit more on that, just talking about the Cobalt blockchain itself. Can you just explain a little bit how that blockchain technology helps support a lot of the original, artisanal and the miners in Africa, and how that money is returned back on the ground, if you like, through your the blockchain method?
So I think I'm not going to talk about blockchain. Blockchain is simply a nice database. It's an immutable. There are many benefits to using blockchain. There are things like smart contracts, but fundamentally, the idea, Bill, is to be compliant, number one, with the OECD due diligence on responsible mineral supply chains in high-risk affected countries. So that's really the idea of monitoring risk, reporting on risk. There's a simple methodology behind it, but you're ultimately exposing data, community data, risk data at the grassroots within the actual mine site and in and around the mine, the communities that are often around these sites. So the concept is really to have a system, and there are a growing number of industry and international schemes. So within Cobalt itself, there's the Battery Metal Alliance, there's the Cobalt Institute that's got a framework. There are all kinds of emerging frameworks, but ultimately based on the OECD guidelines. What we're trying to do is really trace the mineral from point of origin. So the idea of every sack of concentrate that's mined or washed at site has a barcode on it. Backing up from that, each mine site is first of all audited. So any risks are identified. You go in, you see, are there any kids there? Are there any actors benefiting illegally? What are the environmental and workplace health and safety conditions like? So doing an assessment and identifying risks, but on an ongoing basis, doing that monitoring that's required. From a physical standpoint, the idea of ring fencing a site, so there's controlled access in and out. Each miner will have a card with a ID and a barcode, so there's tracking of people and goods in and out of the site. But more importantly, the actual commodities. There's a tagging system that goes on. We collect data at the site, including weights and grades, and then as we're moving product from ultimately around Kolwezi, 400 kilometers west of Lubumbashi. And there's GPS data that's collected. The trucker has ID credentials. The truck itself has GPS. So the idea of tracking commodity through the supply chain. So as it arrives at in our case, a cobalt hydroxide plant in Lubumbashi, again, as it's unloaded, there's an audit. So it's essentially an audit trail of where it's come from. So there's great visibility into the risks. We're not scared about talking about if there are incidents that come up. It's all about how do you remediate them and move forward, and ultimately how does benefit flow back into these communities and into the pockets of the miners. So I think we've dealt under the 3T traceability scheme. There's a cost that we as the processor exporter pay, but very little flows back. So the idea of working with downstream electric vehicle companies and tech companies that can not only have visibility into where their cobalt is coming from, but some of the net benefits will flow back into those communities. They all have amazing, not all of them, but some of them are better than others, but the corporate social responsibility efforts, you're seeing groups like BMW, Samsung, Apple getting directly involved in the DRC. So there's the idea that these are finite resources, and the idea of skills development and training, some microfinance for those in mine sites that may want another opportunity. So I think there's all kinds of interesting ways that communities will benefit above and beyond getting paid fairly for what they're producing.
Yeah, right. Well, that sounds fantastic, Lance, on those ESG issues. I mean, you mentioned there the vehicle manufacturers and the trends. Do you see that the vehicle manufacturers or the original equipment manufacturers, they'll be looking to shorten those supply chains? If you're talking about them getting involved directly at the mine site, do you think they'll want to come in and shorten those chains and have more oversight?
I think so, and I think even beyond that is potentially downstream producers actually investing in mining companies and mines. It's not happening on a wide scale, but the idea of supply certainty, how do you achieve that? It's absolutely what you've talked about, is creating tighter supply chains and getting more directly involved with the primary producers of these metals.
Yeah, right, excellent. Nafi, I just wanted, you've got a bit of an information here around about manganese, about battery grade and non-battery grade manganese. Do you want to just explain a bit about the role of technology in the conversion of non-battery grade manganese?
Yeah. So basically, Bill, we originally were facing, this is a normal trend anyway. So with your manganese, you're either battery grade or non-battery grade, and then you get moved along, if you're non-battery grade, straight to steel manufacturing and those industries. So in the last few years, or for us, for our project in Tabazimbi, it has been barely a year that we have encountered that situation where we felt that with the samples that we were getting, we are slowly getting shuffled down off the battery grade, and which pose a whole lot of other issues for us, where the funding becomes a little bit of an issue, where the iron ore prices or the manganese price wasn't doing well because of the only off-taker into the iron ore steel industry. So we have been engaging, and this is 100% South African technology, where we have consulted with a few players in the country itself, and have been exposed, and now working through that process where this technology, from the inceptor, he believes that it doesn't matter what manganese you have. The technology is bringing in, his technology anyway, is bringing in the possibility of not just having your traditional you're in or you're out. You can still, we are still getting hope, and we're still having it's a trend anyway. We're working through the process where we even though we knew that we weren't really going to make it into the battery grade, now with the technology, we know that we've got an option. We can put through our ore through this technology that we have that is exposed to us, and we then become a battery grade as a manganese producer ourselves. So all of a sudden, the interest in our project it's taking a different focus. It's getting a lot of interest because you are in that EV space, and I believe that the EV is the future. We, like I've indicated before, ourselves in the energy space, we have converted the telehandler that was diesel driven into a 100% electric telehandler. So we want to be part of that. We just don't want to be converting these units and sourcing batteries from outside. We want to be part of the whole chain where we've got our own manganese, we produce our own manganese, we use the technology to make sure that our manganese go back into the battery industry, and through that chain we are then becoming part of the battery manufacturers, and then in turn develop our own electric vehicles that are 100%, if you like, the whole chain has been followed within in-house. So there is a lot of progress in terms of that. It's a work in progress, but there has been proven records of that, and we're looking at working now. It was just being slowed down because of the COVID and travel restrictions going to sites and catching some ore into the smaller processing plants. And once all that has been with our ore has been proven, then we can look at it into having a blown out scale of full operations next to site where we can get our own manganese, have the technology converted on site, and then we produce 100% battery grade manganese locally, and that is our focus, and that is our vision. And we're just going to have to work through the restrictions at the moment that are holding us back. And once we're back on track, we believe that we will be getting our phone will be hot with calls, because that's where that manganese is going to be going through, and we believe that that's the future, and we're very excited to be part of that. And especially because the technology is a South African based technology, even more so that the excitement is. So we're looking forward to be able to move at ease, and once we can, we will be providing the data and being in the front line to make sure that the manganese and the grade of the manganese is not the end of the world. If something can be done with the manganese to get it back into the industry that is the future and is driving everything. Yeah.
All right, great. Sounds pretty interesting technology. Tony, just a little bit more on going back to lithium and some of the barriers to entry for African countries. We've probably seen cobalt and lithium both have quite high prices, and then they've sort of dropped off a little bit in the recent year or two, but most things I've read have talked about the prices coming back. Where do you think the price needs to be, for lithium and I guess for cobalt to, do the end users have to make sure that they are paying the right amount of money to make sure they get the adequate and ethical supply of these materials? Or, I mean, how do you feel the price is at the moment? Does it need to be a bit higher?
Well, it definitely has to be higher. We're probably looking at about a third of the price, certainly on lithium, and probably a bit different in cobalt, but yeah, and you've got some really big producers. These big mines in Chile, they can be quite big producers, and so they've already got production going. It's just a matter of incrementally increasing production from the reserve base that they have. Australia, you've got some big deposits. So often if you've got a head start, you've got some production, then it's to increase production is an incremental cost compared to a new operation. So, but I don't think there's any doubt about it. I mean, even with the advent of which technology, which battery is going to be used, there's going to be a big, strong demand for electric vehicles, certainly, in the developed world. And as costs come down in the developing world, there's going to be a huge demand, and it's all going to be about cost. I mean, You know, who would have said 10 years ago that a solar plant that you put up would be cheaper? You get cheaper electricity from a solar plant than you get from a diesel plant. I mean, you know, this is technology working. So, you know, the manufacturers of batteries or the users of batteries are looking to minimize risk. And that's why you've seen some car makers and some end users taking slices of companies that are producing. So that's one part of it. But then on the other side of it, you're also seeing some very clever scientists, you know, around the world looking to reduce the amount of metals that are used in some of these batteries. So, you know, some extremely clever people around, because, you know, mining is still seen as being a pretty dirty business, and certainly, you know, pictures are still going around, you know, of children in you know, mining and so on, and that's largely in the developed world. It's not just Africa; it's the developing world. So yeah, so prices. I don't think there's any doubt that the prices are going to increase. You know, we're talking about a third of the price for lithium, probably. You know, cobalt is always going to be required, but because of the global meltdown and recession that we're seeing, then, you know, the demand isn't there. But I'm sure you're going to see cobalt demand increase, and you know, and supply is largely in the DRC. So, you know, watch Lance's company, because it's going to do very well. You know, because people need cobalt, and there's very few places on the planet can produce it. So, but I still, you know, we've gone through a bit of a down in terms of recession, in terms of what's going on globally, in terms of the markets, particularly exacerbated by the COVID-19 situation. But we saw this anyway. But I think now we're starting to see some sort of recovery. We're seeing the gold price go up. And, you know, when the gold price goes up, everybody starts getting excited, and you're starting to see money going into exploration, and you're starting to see, you know, flickers of light in terms of exploration and mining happening in Africa. And let's hope that that nations of Africa can recognize that they develop their economies based on mining and beneficiation, with incentives to encourage the foreign investors to come in and encourage local companies to develop more. And this is all boding for the future. So it's all about leadership. It's leadership in companies like ours. It's leadership in government, because we don't want to miss this next upward trend in the sector. And I think Africa, to a certain extent, largely missed. Certainly South Africa did, largely missed the last global upturn. So let's not try and miss this next one, because I can see it coming. There's going to be huge demand, prices are going to go up, lack of metal, exploration, mining, development, beneficiation.
Sounds great, Tony. I'm with you there. All right, well, we've got just 10 or 15 minutes left in the session. We might go to the Q&A section now. We have got a couple of questions that have been sent in by delegates. This one's from Isabel Munoz from DuPont. And she asks, I'm not sure who wants to answer this, but I'll just ask the question and see if anyone in the panel wants to answer it. Do you envisage that policymakers and/or miners will take responsibility in completing the battery chemical life cycle to include recycling? Would you foresee this as being an integrated process, i.e. making battery chemicals from primary resource and at the same time recycling the spent batteries back to the pipeline? Would anyone care to comment on that?
I'll take a start, Bill. So I think with EV batteries or battery storage units, the whole idea of recycling, the commodity prices largely dictate the business case around making money from recycling batteries. So I think that's a variable, but I think we're seeing within North America and Europe in particular a number of young startup companies looking to do exactly that. They've got some interesting patents. They're looking to extract on a cost-effective basis, the cobalt, the lithium, the manganese, all these elements that go in. I think when you look at supply-demand fundamentals, even if every EV battery was recycled for the next few years, you're still going to need primary mines producing. The recycling component will never make up the shortfalls, even if you're looking at very conservative growth curves. So I think, is there a role for mining companies to play? I'm not sure how they would fit in there. Typically, these are very high-tech, process-intensive plants that'll actually extract these metals. Pretty different than basic beneficiation or even something like a hydroxide plant that we're familiar with. So I think I'm not sure how miners fit in. I know that policymakers and legislators certainly have a role and have had a role. When I look at municipalities and even the federal government in Canada, where I'm sitting right now, the government absolutely, whether it's lead acid batteries or electric vehicle batteries, there's a growing body of legislation to keep these things out of landfills and do the right thing for the planet and reuse these elements as best we can.
I think it's something like the mine of the future. You know, the mine of the future, I think, is probably going to be a fully integrated type of operation. You know, a mine, you know, you have to dig the stuff up, you've got to process it, you've got a tailings dam, you've got a big hole in the ground, you've got remediation processes, you've got environmental that you're attending to, communities and so on. So you know, and then the mine sells its concentrate to a, you know, chemical operation, then to a manufacturer, battery manufacturer. Well, you know, all those can be on the same site, and then you can be transporting a very valuable commodity, you know, and they spend less time transporting waste or non-final product material. So it does make a lot of sense, and probably, you know, so if you started mining on the moon or in Mars, everything would be together. I'm sure it would, and I could probably see that in 25 years, maybe 50 years, that's probably gonna happen. You know, in this, there's probably going to be an integrated, but it's going to be a long road, and you know, you're going to see a collapse in a sense, or an integration of the whole value chain. But it does make a lot of sense. But you know, we're not anywhere near that. Certainly in certain of the mining metals that we're in at the moment.
I also, if I can chip in there, I believe it's just going to come down to the cost, and if you've got an end user of the batteries that's using a large volume of them batteries, you're not going to be in the business of just, it depends on the life cycles anyway, but then you're not going to be in the business of just buying the things and then when they're no good, you chuck them. I believe the cycle will come in, especially with the mining companies now, that most of your equipment in the mines are going to be mostly still already started now moving from your diesel powered engine into battery. So I believe there's going to be incentives, and there's also going to be environmental issues there with the disposing of the batteries, and with that comes the regulations, and the regulations then brings about opportunity. So I believe it's going there where it's going to be integrated, where you will be able to have a substantial volume of the used up batteries, and then be able to recycle them at a certain cost anyway, and then for return of the newer units. So I think the chain is only a matter of time. The chain links up, and it's the regulatory boards that look after this, and the environmental hazards that comes in, and all that through. Like always, we feel that it's going to be a burden, but there are opportunities around that, and anything that can bring down the cost, everyone will jump on. And I believe it's only a matter of time someone identified the opportunity to be able to make a business and a business case out of recycling and bring the old batteries back into the manufacturing process to produce the new units, I believe, anyway.
All right. Yeah, well, good answers there. Yeah, well, hopefully we will see that future, and we'll see it sooner rather than later. One last question that we have here, it's from Kim Mesnaros from Easy, and he's asking the panel, slightly off at the end, but saying, his question is there an indication of which way the power supply of future transport is going, i.e. will it be lithium ion or LOHC? And the second part of the question is, will the African mining industry in the PGM sector survive the transition period from internal combustion engines to EV vehicles? Would anyone like to have a go at answering that?
I'll start, Bill. I think the battery chemistry, and Tony alluded to this earlier, it's changing. As the price of cobalt skyrocketed a couple of years ago, there was incentives to create a battery with less cobalt. And there are already some well-established ones, but I think when you look at bringing a battery into commercial production, all of the testing that goes on, it takes 5 to 10 years to bring these on, largely for safety concerns. We've seen with less cobalt, batteries become more volatile, they catch on fire. So I think the chemistry is unknown. We're seeing certainly companies like Tesla, their Chinese plant, they're moving, they'll get less range with a battery that has less cobalt. But for some markets, that's perfect if you're just doing short trips. So I think the markets will evolve and change. Again, the regulations and incentives for consumers to go to EVs, we're seeing even with COVID in Europe, the EV sales have been surprisingly good. But I think that the battery chemistry is going to evolve. There's all kinds of interesting stuff going on, even outside of battery metals, just hydrogen-powered vehicles. So I think we're in a very interesting time in humanity to find, but it's going to be a blend, and I can tell you, nickel, cobalt, lithium, manganese, aluminum, these are the critical ones, and the world does not mine enough of it if we're to see the world turn more green and achieve some of our global environmental targets by moving away from fossil fuels. So I think there will be solid demand. What that chemistry looks like, who knows? I think on the palladium, platinum, PGMs, there's definitely combustion engines clearly use these elements. But Anglo-Platts, the world's largest producer, as announced last year, they're even looking to produce an electric battery using PGMs. So we'll see how that fits into the larger equation.
Yeah, thanks for that, Lance. Yeah, it's also interesting with some of these underground mines looking to reduce their particulates underground and looking at electrical solutions. So I wonder if that'll help drive the industry as well. But certainly, on the hydrogen side of things, that I think palladium and platinum is still used quite a bit in those vehicles. So there might be a place for PGMs, but just in a different way. I guess that's what you're saying. All right. We've just got a couple of minutes to go. I think we'll try and wrap up the panel here. Does anybody, would everyone just like a minute just to close off and just summarise what their feelings on today's panel, and just make sure they cover any points they think we might have missed over the last hour. First of all, Tony, would you like to go first?
Okay. Well, thank you. Thank you, Bill. So I think there are a number of important points. Number one, I think probably most important is that the world is going green. The world is seeing, the young generation, not our generation. We're used to cars and jets and so on. The young generation are going to change the world. They don't like all this dirty stuff. They don't like pollution. And I think there's going to be a lot of ethical buying. So the world is definitely going to go away from fossil fuels that are pollutants, unless that pollutants can be stopped. And if electric's the way to go, or hydrogen, then technology is going to determine, you know, the best route. But I certainly think the new generations that are coming through, I can see it in, you know, in certainly my children and some grandchildren, you know, they're all talking about the environment and how dirty things are, how dirty diesel is, and so on. So I think that's a global trend. I think the populations of the world are growing and getting richer and becoming more affluent. So I don't see there's a big transition from going from internal combustion through to other forms, or whether it's battery or hydrogen. If there's no real cost comparison, and really it's all about it's all about environment. So I think there's going to be, you know, after this COVID-19 thing is over, there's going to be a new world dawning, and I think that new world is about growth and values, and I think that creates a great opportunity for Africa as a continent, because people are going to need minerals and development and so on. And I think but it's all about risk, and you know, how does Africa compound its benefit that it has from its mineral riches. And I think you know, countries have to be able to set a stall where they can attract foreign investment and big foreign investment, because certainly Africa has the skills, it has the resources, and what it doesn't have is necessary stability or necessarily leadership that can enable, you know, a 10, a 20-year plan. Because I think, you know, whether it's infrastructure or education or incentives, that is what is needed. So I think that's going to set the continent apart if we can get it right.
Thanks, Tony. Lance?
Yeah, just quickly, I'm very excited about the future for Africa and its role in the electric vehicle, electric battery revolution. As Tony mentioned, it's blessed with mineral wealth. It's got a talent base. It's one of the only populations that's going to see great growth to the end of this century. I think we're going from 1 billion people on the continent to 4 billion. A lot of bright young people looking for opportunities. So I think it's incumbent upon us developing projects in Africa to create as much benefit locally. And we look at a project as almost like a dartboard, where the bullseye, the most benefit should flow into the communities, to the province, to the federal government, to the continent. So that's what we're striving to do. There are all kinds of challenges. It's not easy, but I think with the growing visibility into whether it's food supply chains or mineral supply chains, there's growing visibility and growing pressure on companies to act responsibly. And for the big downstream producers of consumer goods, there's a lot of pressure on them to do the right thing and work with the right actors upstream within communities and at mine sites. So we're happy to be in DRC as a good partner for where we're working and with the government. So excited to see what happens now and post-COVID. So thank you for having me on this panel.
Yeah, excellent. Thanks, Lance. Glad that you're here. And finally, Naphtally.
Yeah, thanks, Bill. Yeah, I believe the energy space in Africa is the future, and I believe Africa does have a great future ahead of the continent as well. And there are opportunities in Africa, and we're really excited as young Africans to be part of this dispensation. And there's a few things there that were brought up through as we were talking. We were talking about the carbon emissions and how we're gonna move from there into cleaner energies. I believe I've also been fortunate to kind of being involved through our business in a wide spectrum of the industry. So from the underground mine contracting perspective, you either have to to adjust or get pushed out. So there is a big cost with underground mines in terms of a carbon underground, where you need to work on your regulations and your rating. There is also issues with the heat, where your diesel energies emit a lot of heat, and there's a lot of costs that have to go there to put your cooling towers, pump fresh air and cooler air straight into underground. So all those lump sums of costs that are in very variable stages of your operations can be all put in one basket and replaced with a cleaner solution, cleaner electric vehicle. So I think there's going to be, in the contracting point of view anyway, underground mine contracting, it's going to come down to competitiveness, and I think that is the edge. And the second thing that Tony touched on is the leadership. I think I just ask for a little bit of patience with the continent itself, Africa, or maybe I should go further down into South Africa. I think if we compare the rest of Africa with the rest of the world, we need to understand there as well that there has been a big jump with Africans in leadership, accountability, reliability, and planning. So as Africans, we only been having a very short space of doing your record keeping, whereas the rest of the world, your Europes, go back to the 1066 during the doomsday, where the accountability and accounting and management of the governments go back then. So I think we're just gonna have to apply a little bit of patience with the Africans and let them transition into a modern world, if you like. Not long ago they were hunter and gatherer, so it's a lot to take, and it's gonna be a lot of bit of trial and error. But I think we're moving in the right direction, and with the influence of AMAG and all the other organizations trying to work with the leadership of African countries, I believe that it is an influence that we need. It's not going to be easy. Change has never been easy. And I just ask that maybe we continue to work with the Africans, people who have got business that run in Africa, organizations that support Africa, to continue persistently so and be there and try to drive that the continent. And I believe the continent is the future, and a very good fertile ground for the world to take off in terms of renewable energy anyway.
All right. Great, thanks very much. What a fantastic way to end the panel session. All right, well, good to see you all. So thanks from Australia, Canada, and South Africa. So hope to see you all soon. Okay, thanks, bye.
Thank you, Bill.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Cheers.